Matej Kliman is an expert in the field of public support, research and development funding, public procurement, intellectual property management, and technology transfer. The lecturer has been dealing with this issue for more than 15 years, and he is going to share his experience. So get ready for his talk. You can start, Mr. Kliman.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this conference. Unfortunately, I think I have more questions than answers myself. I would like to say that in comparisons with my previous speakers, where I think in the area of research and publication, many of the moral or ethic issues have been clearly defined. In the sector of technology transfers, the whole subject is older because we are somewhere between the world of public or publicly funded research and development, universities and academia on one hand, and a sector of business, which is a quite a different world with different ethic rules, etc. Also, I'm in a different position because I myself am not a scientist nor a businessman that would be involved in technology transfer. I'm an advisor, and many of you are probably thinking, why on earth is an advisor preaching us on ethics, coming from one of the sectors which is not well known for ethics, which I think is true. So I think the problem of speaking about ethic rules in technology transfer is that I think these rules are much less clearly defined than in the sector of research and development and publications or teaching. So we need to ask ourselves, what are these rules that should apply to technology transfer, and what is their source? Also the point of view from legal perspective might be a bit different than from research and development perspective. So us as lawyers, we are being taught that ethics are rules which stand outside of the legal system. They can affect the legal system because many of the legal norms are defined by the rules of ethics. Some of them affect the way that the laws are interpreted. They affect the case law, and some of them are remained outside of the legal system, and there are just norms that are not codified, and they are either observed or they are not observed, and observing and not observing them has consequences that are not purely legal. And so if we are speaking about ethic rules, and we are talking about the fact that in the technology transfer, they are mostly not codified, there are no documents which would define a legal technology transfer, then we need to find the sources for such rules. And this is also a question because sometimes there are people who are lecturing ethics in science, and they tend to narrow the rules to certain sources of ethical or moral rules, which can stem from religious background or from literature, philosophy, or from some idea of a common ground of rules that we can all agree upon. Then also we need to speak about what is technology transfer, because if I'm about to talk about ethics in technology transfer, I need to explain what I mean. So I think we could divide technology transfer in two big or many categories. One of them is saying that there is technology transfer, which could be called forms of commercialization, which means types of technology transfer which are made in the business sector in order to first of all, transfer technology to the practical use, but also to get some money out of it, to earn some economic benefits. And the typical transactions in this category are mostly licensing or creation of spin-off companies, or providing services, advisory, or other, or even producing some technology ourselves within the university or academic sector. And then we have a broader definition, which has a broader scope outside of commercialization, where as technology transfer, also other activities are considered. Some of them were mentioned. For example, publication can be deemed a transfer of technology into practical life. Also, mobility of people between and within the sectors and within the sectors, and various other activities. As I said, transfer of technology is a meeting point between two worlds, between the academic sector and the business sector. In my experience, even though we heard a lot of criticism and a lot of cases which were subject to public criticism, is that I would say that in the academic sector, I have met with a lot of people with a very strong scientific integrity and moral integrity, whereas in the business sector, one could say either that there is less ethical integrity, or that there are various environments which have their own rules of what is ethical and what is not. So how does ethics impact technology transfer? Because if we say that there are certain rules which also apply to the ways in which we transfer technologies into practical life, we need to speak or discuss how this can positively or negatively affect this area of activities. I think probably the most important factor, and this is also common with the ethics that has been discussed in the previous talks, is the effect on the reputation of the institutions which are undertaking the transfer of technologies. There are various aspects to it. Goodwill is something that can be established in the value of money. So it's a special category. A certain university has a certain value that's associated with its name, and good transfer may increase this goodwill of such institution, and bad transfer may substantially harm the goodwill of such institution. This can result in less access to funding, in political criticism. It can have the impact of demotivating students to study at such institution. It can have a negative impact on employment policy, because sometimes the result may be that people just don't want to work on such institution. It has also impact on the atmosphere within such institution, within a research organization, or between research organization and the partner. And of course, it has impact on people's psychology and conscience, because I think it's one of the greatest fears of any scientist is that their technology can be used for bad purposes. So this is just an introduction on how I understand the topic. I would like to ask the present colleagues and speakers if they agree or have a different view on the general assessment of this topic.
I agree.
Thank you for joining in, Dr. Fortinek. Yes, probably that sums it all up. So the first topic, if you could stay with me, and thank you for joining, is the question of technology transfer and money. This is definitely an important issue, and I want to basically share my experience with this topic. So there's this general challenge, I think, for the whole of Europe. I hope you would agree with me that somehow we are relatively very good at brilliant research and publication, but the problem is that where we fail compared with other states is that sometimes we are not so good at implementing these brilliant ideas into practical life. In short, to transfer the technologies into practical life. I think this has different reasons, most of which are based on tradition. And during my 15 years of experience, I see a great shift in the whole viewing of technology transfer. At the beginning, my prevailing experience was from researchers that technology transfer is something ethically problematic in itself, that the most ethical activity is just, let's say, basic research-oriented research, and that the technology transfer is something that the bad people are concerned with. And there's a strong shift, I think, in Czech Republic, in my experience, where this is also a generational shift, where younger researchers view technology transfer as something that's integral to the whole scope of research and development activities, and an important part. And with it, hand in hand, comes the question of money. How important is money in technology transfer? I myself am very often involved in different tech transfer studies, which analyze specific projects from different, usually economic points of view. Very often, I must admit that the ethical issues are not stressed enough, I would say. And some of the ethical issues are somehow hidden within the economical assessment. So most tech transfer projects have a part which is discussing purely financial gain from the transfer projects, which is usually an Excel table which somehow sums up the possible financial gains from the project, and side by side with it is a broader economic analysis which speaks about other benefits of the specific tech transfer project, which is, for example, the impact on economy, employment, environment, health, etc. And I must say that when these documents are assessed, and this is surprising for me, the stress is often put on the money itself. So we as advisors are often pushed to emphasize the monetary aspects of the tech transfer project. And what I try to do in my work is trying to put an emphasis on the different aspects of tech transfer. So that's one point. Financial versus non-financial aspects in technology transfer, and how to argue, and which is more important. And then there's this other issue, which I think is also very important. How much money should we ask for our technologies? How much focus should we be on that? How much money should we distribute between the researchers, the inventors and authors? And how much money should be paid to the institution? And also, is it bad if we earn money on technologies, or is it an internal part of technology transfer? Sometimes there is this idea that we should transfer for market prices, which is something that's very hard to define in technology transfer. So these questions of how important is it that we earn a certain amount of money for a license sold to a patent, or to some kind of design or anything, versus the other aspects of putting the technology to work, helping certain people, helping the environment, etc., etc. How to approach this? How to compare these factors? That's basically a question that I'm asking, rather than a statement which I would be able to formulate as an answer. Would you comment on these topics?
If I may step in, yeah, I would like to comment on the topic of ethicality of technology transfer. That you said that some people perceive technology transfer as unethical. I would maybe put it like other way around. I would perceive as unethical to do science that is not transferable to do some good for society, because that's the main reason we have science here. So what are like, why should we produce the results which are not transferable to to any goodness for the society? I know that for the fundamental, for the basic research, it's complicated, and then the avenues are not like straightforward. So the technology transfer is not there the straightforward. But like all the science that is done, in my opinion, should be done with the view that it increases the quality of life of people.
Yes, you are very right. Also, somebody says that we shouldn't use the word technology transfer, because then we are limiting the issue of transferring the results of science to technically oriented branches of science, and we are forgetting social sciences and different branches of science that wouldn't be included in the term, or their results wouldn't be included in the term of technology. So how bad is it if a scientist gets rich from a certain technology? I will tell an anecdote. In Czech Republic, we have a famous scientist, Professor Holý, which used on the Institute of Biochemics in Prague. He invented a cure for various diseases. And what I heard as a story is that when he died, the institute asked his wife, where should we send you all that money that these patents are still earning? And what was revealed, that his family didn't know that he's a rich person. And only after he died, his wife, when she went to cleaning service, that she found in his pockets receipts or account numbers where he stored the money from his research. Also, there's a big discussion, because most universities and academia, at least in Czech Republic, have a motivation system which is aimed at providing the scientists, and they are entitled to this from patent laws, to have certain financial benefits from the inventions that they make at universities and other research organizations. So the question that I think is on the table is how much profit should go to the inventor, and to what extent is it ethical, and when does it stop to be ethical?
Well, from the point of view of labor law, if you do some work as a part of your employment, so the results belong to your employer. So then it should be up to the institution what to do with that money that come from the technology transfer. But also then we get to the question of motivation. So it's not like black and white. And I would say that the most important thing is to have all these issues clarified before the project actually starts, because afterwards it's always biased by the potential gains of the stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's usually a method which is progressive, which under the rules of the institution, in the first stages of technology transfer, more money is awarded to the inventor, to the author of the technology, or to his team, and then as the income rises, the ratio is reduced, and the institution gets more money. And I would like to stress that sometimes the financial aspects of the technology transfer are it is too much focus is put on them. I think what we should realize is that in many areas, sometimes it is more important that the technology gets into use than how much money the institution earns on the particular patent or invention or different kind of result. So that's one topic that I wanted to discuss, and thank you for joining in. The other question, I think, which is also very interesting, is the ethical versus non-ethical uses of technology in practical life and in business. I think most scientists find like one of their goals or biggest awards in science is probably the Nobel Prize. And most of the scientists also know that Nobel Prize is basically connected with the question of ethics and use in technology, because Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite, if I can simplify it, is one of the examples of a scientist which makes an invention, and during his life finds that the invention wasn't used for the purposes he intended, but it was used for bad purposes, for war. And then we are getting back to the issue of money. This technology earns him a lot of money, and what he does in the end is that in his will, he dedicates this money for furthering research and development and the science, and somehow tries to reconciliate or heal his bad conscience as a scientist. And I think one of the major ethical questions which are very often overlooked is the ethical use of technology. I think my experience is in the Czech Republic that we have very little technology transfer projects, and if we are successful, if there's a success on the horizon, and we see a commercial partner that's interested in some technology, wants to invest in the technology, then we are maybe a bit too eager to proceed with the project, and we might try to think back and try to self-regulate the uses of such technology. And I think there are two, from my point of view, there are two interesting questions. The first is, what are the good and the bad uses of technology? How to approach the question whether such and such use of technology is ethical or non-ethical. And the other question for me is practical, is to how to regulate such thing. Because when we look at the first question, I think there are some easy or easier decisions to be made, where we differentiate between the military or war or non-war use of a certain technology as a one deciding moment, or who is the person that we are selling the technology? Are we selling it to someone we know, or someone we don't know? Are we selling it to businesses in our countries, or are we perhaps selling it to businesses that might be connected with terrorist organizations or states which support non-democratic states, which violate human rights, etc. So that's one level of questioning. And then how can we safeguard it? If we get back to Alfred Nobel, had he imagined that dynamite would be used in wars? Was there a legal mechanism or a way to prevent such use of the technology? I would like to welcome Professor Pichdomenek to join us, because I would also like to know his opinions on these subjects. Would you like to comment on these issues from ethical point of view? Is there a way to identify good and bad uses of technology, and are there ways to prevent the bad uses?
This is something that the European Commission in particular has tried to discuss. I mean, there have been different projects in Europe that also have been devoted to these questions. One of the tools that have been devoted is what is called RRI, there's Responsible Research and Innovation, which, I mean, it's a tool to think about this kind of uses. You are completely right, this is an important. In my opinion, this is very difficult. This is very difficult. Why it is difficult? Because some technologies may be devoted to some kind of solutions, of social solution, but then they find other types of solutions. How can we foresee all these developments? In my opinion, this is very difficult, if not impossible. But so I don't think that it's, I mean, in my opinion, and also the perception of society is changing. You see, for instance, now we are facing, which could be a possible problem with food supply due to the war. So people are asking to lower some requirements for environmental regulation of agricultural production, for instance. Yeah, just an example. But in the uses of telecommunications, for instance, it was completely unpredictable. Some uses. I mean, so I don't think so. I think that we have to always be keep an eye on what is happening, trying to look for the developments and possible consequences. And I mean, I don't think that we can avoid, as a scientist, to be all the time trying to respond to the questions that the society is asking to us, and to. So I mean, I personally believe more in a continuous, you see, a continuous way of alerting society, discussing with people, with politicians, for deciders, and then to advise them how to use these technologies. It's my opinion.
Dr. Foltinek, like to join us in this topic?
Yeah, I want to say that like any tool has a potential to be misused. So I believe that scientists should not be stressed much by this threat, because imagine the knife, like everybody uses it in a kitchen, and it's a definitely beneficial tool. And it can be used also for the murder, but it doesn't mean that we should not develop better knives. And also, I would like to add that it's sometimes vice versa, that the tools or technologies that were originally developed for warship are largely beneficial for the society. Like internet, it was designed for the military communication in US Army, or GPS was designed to have more precise weapons. And now the whole society is benefiting from these technologies. So this is something that is on the other side of the wave. So if there are some advances or some developments that are misused, we can always say that there are some technologies originally designed for killing people who are used in a beneficial way.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't agree more. There is also a provocative thought in my head that we have this strong competition in technology transfer in some countries like China or United States, and we are asking ourselves, why are they better at transferring technology into real life than we are? And the question that I have is that there are stricter ethical standards in Europe in some areas, for example, with regards to genetical modification, with regards to pharmaceutical products, etc. Whether, you know, this is a strange situation where we are competing with them, but we are applying different ethical standards on technology transfer.
Well, I don't think that we should blame ethics. I think that we have to think about. I mean, I've been in several ethics committees, probably yourself, and I think that we, from this kind of ethical reflection, I think we should try to avoid always to limit, to say no. I mean, the best thing would be to orient, to see how these new technologies can be used in the best possible way. So I don't think that all ethical reflection should be to put barriers, to put something. No, I mean, that from a point of view is a mistake, because complete barriers afterwards, they have some indirect effects, as you are saying yourself. No? Other people are using and they don't care. So I think that if this is so, that our standards, I mean, our standards should be well-funded. Well, I mean, for instance, safety standards in pharmaceuticals, in food, in all these questions that we have in many technological uses. I think that are very important that we have the best possible safety standards, but everyone should be clear, well-funded, that really are safety standards, as not ways of hiding competitor struggles on something like that. No, I mean, and we have a duty, because in Europe maybe we have been putting rules for everything, and some of these rules are not well. They don't have a clear reason for that. It's just, you see, because we have a precautionary principle that should guide us for everything. We have to think about. We have to think about the proper use and all these things. I think that one of the questions of you in some countries, you see, probably the same question you are asking in Czechia is the same we are asking in Spain or in other countries about technology transfer. At least my experience is that people are now in academia, in many are ready to have new spin-off companies, to collaborate, to make contracts. But the scientific community in my country is small and it's underfunded, you see, and probably the same thing in your country. If you have a small community, this community is not well funded. If your community has to struggle, how can be competitive? You see, if we have bureaucratic rules that make us difficult to work in everything, you see. So I think that we have to look first to our own the way that we do science in our countries, and try to solve that, to convince our society and our governments that science is essential for democracy, as someone has said, and is essential for our society.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. Dr. Politinek, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, maybe answer the question that you raised, if we should blame the ethical standards for the drawback. I don't think we should blame ethical standards as such, but if there is something to blame, it should be the implementation of the standards, because one thing to implement the standards to make them beneficial for the institution and to increase the quality. And of course, like any measure, you can over-implement and create it to the obstacle. And this is something that should not happen. Yeah, the ethical standards should be an obstacle to unethical behavior, but not an obstacle to like ethical and beneficial use of the scientific results.
I agree. My point wasn't to blame the ethics. I just wanted to raise the question that sometimes the competition is stronger because they have less regulation. And I'm not saying that we should lower our regulation. That was not my point. But thank you anyway. So as you see, these are difficult questions that are not so easy to regulate. I myself sometimes write license agreements, and I always try to put some provisions into those agreements which allow us as a licensing party of the technology to have a word in a way how the technology is used, to have a chance to withdraw from the contract if the license is used, for example, in connection with some problematic subjects, or if it tends to a use that's that it can affect us negatively, our goodwill and things like that. But of course, this is also not an easy discipline. So that thing covered. I would like to talk briefly as an ending to my presentation to an interesting aspect, at least for me, of technology transfer during COVID. I would like to hear your opinion on it, but I think in Czech Republic, the science has made a very good job in helping the state in overcoming the COVID crisis, which I think helped the Czech science in a way. For example, following the COVID crisis, there's this project of an virology institute in the Czech Republic, which would focus on the research of transferable diseases, and also I think there is a certain moral high ground that the Czech science has gained by showing that it's ready to respond to the needs created by such crisis. I myself have helped create and operate several companies that were created within the academic sector, which were focused on protective tools and testing, etc., etc. And what was important for me was a certain shift in the perception of these activities. I don't know if you encountered this as well, and I would like to hear your opinions. But these are basically ethical considerations, because I think at the start, when there was lack of protective tools and lack of testing capacity, many of these endeavors were basically perceived as something exclusively positive. But as the time went and the crisis has neared an end, and some of these endeavors were perceived in a way which could be characterized by a sentence, "Oh, you are earning money on COVID." And some of the academic people involved in these activities even try to distance themselves from these technology transfer activities. So this, at least in Czech Republic, was an interesting, because we were discussing that the topic of money in the technology transfer, of the problematic of defining what is ethical use and what is not. And I think the COVID crisis showed us that even over time, these perceptions can change. Do you have the same experience, and or some different view or perspective on this topic?
Well, I think that there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the crisis, no? Not only about our system, our health systems in our countries, about how to deal with global crises. So, and of course, as you said, I mean, finally, the development of diagnosis needed new technologies, new vaccines were completely new. People realized that. That does not, prevent that scientific community. I think in all countries have reacted. Well, some people tried to gain some popularity, and you see that it did not help too much. The uncertainty was so high, you see, especially at the beginning, that to transfer to people that we were dealing with a completely unknown type of a virus that may react in different ways. And so I think that was difficult. And in this situation, the media had also a mixed type of reaction. We have to think about all these things, no? About our health system, about how to deal with global crises, how to we have this relation with the scientific community and the medical community with the media, no? How to transmit this uncertainty, no? We have to learn a lot of lessons on that. But I think the final situation, I mean, I suppose many people realize that it was research that was essential for going out of the crisis and to understand and going out of the crisis. So I think that from this point of view, well, I think in general in Europe, ethical standards were not lower. So all the treatments were supervised by EMA in a in the past, but not lowering the standards. That was very important, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, and maybe over time this perception will change and fix on a more objective way. Dr. Foltinek, would you like to add something to that?
I was just remembering the discrepancies between what scientists proposed and what were the predictions, and then the actions of the government. I think that this is pretty similar in other countries as well. And it also emphasizes the need for scientists to be able to defend and to explain their conclusion, and it's also part of I would say part of ethical standards. So not only to come up with some finding, but to be able to sell it, to explain it to the general public, because it then increases the chances that these findings will be accepted and actually transferred to practice.
Yeah, it's a very good point. In the whole tumult of communication and miscommunication, it has become clear that's one of the definite lessons learned, as also Professor Pizomenet said, that this is something that we learned that we need to communicate, and we need to be able to communicate the findings and the results of the science in each particular case. Thank you. So from my point of view, this is everything that I wanted to share with you today. I'm sorry that it's more questions than answers, but I think really this is one of the opportunities that stand before us as technology transfer develops, at least in Czech Republic, to not to forget the ethical issues and try to regulate or self-regulate these so that we are successful in our technology transfer, and we maintain the reputation of the academic sector.